Though Sigmar and his allies had driven the Norsii from the lands of the Empire to their bleak dwellings in the north, there was never any doubt that the sea wolves would one day return to wreak their terrible retribution for the loss of their lands. In 9 IC, barely a decade since they were driven back, the Norse raids restarted with a vengeance. In the aftermath of their defeat at Sigmar's hand, the issue arose of what was to be done with the Norsii lands left lordless, with their occupants fleeing back far to the north. Most of the surrounding tribes were too fearful to settle there, as the memory of the Norsii depredation loomed long in their minds, and the lands themselves were said to be cursed by the Norsii's evil veneration of the dark gods, the listless spectres of thousands sacrificed upon their altars and pyres haunting the land. In the end it was the Ropsmen, a northerly tribe so far removed from the rest of the Reich that they were to an extent almost as much of a different race unto the other tribes of the Reich Basin as the Norsii themselves, who mustered the courage to assimilate into the Norsii lands. This proved to be their undoing. The Norsii regathered their strength in the north, and the tribes became unified under the leadership of a mighty warrior king whose very name bespoke the naked brutality of the Northmen. Cormac Bloodaxe, chieftain of the Iron Wolves clan and the champion of Khorne, son of the slain High King of the Norsii, Varag Skulltaker. Under Cormac, the Norsii launched a vicious series of raids upon the Ropsmen and their new holdings, destroying various settlements and kidnapping their women and elderly and holding them as ransom, extracting from the Ropsmen a season's worth of servitude. Their next act was to tear the throat out from the Udos tribe, launching a raid upon the great city of Horgvik and the castle of Salzenhus. Joined by the Ropsmen, the Norsii slaughtered the inhabitants of the Udos' capital, including the royal family of the clan, thus plunging the Udos into disarray as the beleaguered tribe fell into a succession crisis. With the defence of the north shattered, the Norsii went on to further threaten imperial holdings in the Heartlands. Under the advice of his shaman, Kar Odison, Cormac Bloodaxe limited his raids to the purposes of psychological warfare and spreading fear amongst the Imperials. Tales of countless warriors butchered like sheep, and men, women and children alike left impaled upon great stakes in honour of the Norsii war god, spread like wildfire amongst the hearth fires of Imperial inns and villages, sapping the courage of defenders with every retelling. In time, sagas of Cormac's victories reach back to Norska and the Chaos Wastes, drawing many tribes of Northmen to his banner. Even tribes amongst the Kurgan and Hung, hearing tales of a Norsii king's valour and exaltedness before the gods, made the journey to the west and pledged their lives to Cormac's service. As his numbers swelled, so too did Cormac's thirst for vengeance, and soon the burning fire of revenge in his heart propelled him to take the fire south after a year of raiding. When Emperor Sigmar heard of what had befell the Udosis and the fate of Count Vorfilla, a creeping darkness soon began to take him over. Vorfilla was one of Sigmar's closest friends and allies, and to hear of his death and the death of his family struck Sigmar deeply. Demanding the dragon banner be held up once more, the Emperor gathered a mighty host of warriors to avenge the deaths. Made mostly of Udosis, these vengeful clansmen had taken bloodthirsty relish in the war, killing all before them with hearts hungry to avenge the death of Count Vorfilla and their own people. The stories of his death had been told and retold so often that the truth was lost, and the horror of what the Ropsmen were said to have done grew to ridiculous levels. Marching east, Sigmar put to the torch every single Ropsman settlement he could find, and at the Battle of Roskova, nearly 3,000 Ropsman warriors were killed on that blasted heath, and there was no quarter for the wounded. Twice more they had brought the scattered Ropsman warrior bands to battle, and each time Sigmar ordered the bloodthirsty banner raised. The slaughter had been terrible, and the screams of the dying and images of burning villages haunted the dreams of the other tribesmen that did not relish in the slaughter. last, what remained of the Ropsman people huddled in terror on the bloody banks of the river Linsk. 100 Ropsman warriors in iron hauberks and bronze helms tried to impose some order on their people's flight across the river, but it was a hopeless task. The horror of their tribe's destruction overcame any thought other than escape. Braving the still forming ice was preferable to annihilation at SIGMAR's hands. As a portion of the ice gave way, dozens of people plunged into the sluggish black water. Weighed down with all their worldly possessions, they did not return to the surface. Weeping mothers tried to pull their crying children away from the holes, watching as families drowned in front of their eyes. The sight was a heartbreaking scene to witness, and only SIGMAR and the Udoses seemed to not care. In a span of a few months, less than 1,000 was all that remained of them. Unable to stand idly by any longer, SIGMAR's childhood friend Pengrad came to SIGMAR and desperately tried to reason with him.
Listen to yourself, SIGMAR. This bloodshed is madness. It sullies everything we've achieved over the years. Is this how you want to be remembered? As a butcher of men, a tyrant king, a killer of women and children no better than a green-skinned? I'm soul sick of this killing. Every man here has blood on his hands, and our honor is stained by what we have done here. SIGMAR, it's time to go home.
At first, SIGMAR would not be deterred, but Pengrad was SIGMAR's friend, and he did not fear his wrath. With words, Pengrad told SIGMAR what he needed to hear. What he was doing today was not him, and he needed to stop it. Deep inside, SIGMAR fought to control his unreasoning hatred, which filled his every thought, his body shaking until he finally saw through the haze, tears flooding down his cheek, even as his face was twisted with hate. Finally, SIGMAR allowed the survivors to flee, and returned home with his warriors.
You see, this is what you are. This is who you are. Embrace it and the pain will end. Cease your resistance and give me your flesh to wear. You cannot keep my spirit out forever, and when you are mine, I will give you power beyond your wildest imaginings. This petty empire of man that you have built is nothing to what we might achieve together. There are lands far beyond these shores to be conquered, worlds beyond this paltry rock to be enslaved. Stand at my side, and this entire world will be yours.
Yet no sooner had SIGMAR returned to his city of Reichdorf, that the same darkness which haunted his mind came back stronger than ever. With Gal Maraz and Alaric's crown given to Pendrag for safekeeping, there was nothing that could deter the voice in his head. As the voice began to feed his darker emotions, SIGMAR's thoughts of compassion and mercy were replaced with distrust and rage. When SIGMAR heard that the Cherusin and Talyuchans once more raided each other's lands despite SIGMAR's demands, the Emperor forcibly brought the two counts into chains and placed them upon a hay wagon bound for the marshes. SIGMAR's mind ached with conflicting thoughts and emotions. As much as he knew what he was doing was very wrong, the rage that fed his urge to kill pulsed like fiery waves in his skull, blotting out any thoughts of compassion. So vile and bitter was this rage that he did not even recognize it as his own. SIGMAR had known anger in his life, but this rage had been nursed for thousands of years, a hatred that had grown to immense proportions that SIGMAR's mind recoiled from in such darkness. Despite this, a wave of calming warmth blocked out SIGMAR's consciousness, and the darkness reassumed control. Upon the marshes, the Emperor presented to the Counts their deaths, but not just any, ones he believed were fit for all traitors. For a man to die by the thrice death upon the marshes would deny him his journey onwards to the next world, a fate spent eternally in damnation. Yet as the sword was ready to fall, once again another of Sigmar's childhood friends, Wulfgard, intervened and demanded Sigmar to fight against his darkness. Soon the two brothers came to blows, and as Sigmar was ready to strike down his friend, a body soon surfaced upon the stagnant waters. In mere moments, Sigmar saw the face of the old hag woman, and in turn her eyes were open, and they stared directly at Sigmar. Sigmar cried out as he saw himself reflected in the hag woman's eyes, sitting astride his oldest and dearest friend, with murder in his heart. For the briefest instant, he did not recognize himself, the drawn, parchment-skinned monster that revelled in bloodshed and pain of the living. Now Sigmar knew what the old hag had told him all that time ago. In that instant, Sigmar's true self saw the darkness within the crown, reliving all the evil that he had caused and the revulsion and horror it induced upon him, snapped Sigmar back to reality. Sigmar sobbed when he came to, yet as he was about to remove the crown, fiery agony exploded inside his head as the vile entity tried to forcibly take control. Screaming with agony, the weeping Sigmar ran off into the marshes, where every step he took, the entity tempted Sigmar with all his greatest desires. As Sigmar slowly sank into the marshy waters, his mind fighting desperately against this entity, it would have seemed that all was lost. Yet through the darkness, Sigmar heard first the voice of his lover Ravenna, and then his beloved father Bjorn, and through their words, Sigmar found the strength to wake up from the darkness and remove the crown from his head. With the last of his strength, Sigmar ripped the crown free from his head and swam for the surface, but his body was tired beyond reckoning. As darkness soon enveloped his vision, it seemed to be over if not for a strong pair of hands which hauled Sigmar out of the murky waters. Bloodied and muddy, Wulfgard and Sigmar embraced each other, and Sigmar, seeing the errors of his ways, begged for his forgiveness. Wulfgard said that it was the crown's doing, and after returning Galmoraz and Alaric's crown to Sigmar, the Emperor made ready to do what was right. Sigmar locked the crown away in the deepest, darkest chamber beneath the temple of Shalya, and asked Count Aloysius and Count Krugar for forgiveness. With everything set right, Sigmar geared the Empire for war,